Hey, I'm Sarah, and this is the Goddess in Training podcast. This isn't about being perfect or polished or having it all figured out. This is about what happens when you actually start listening to your body, your intuition, your patterns, your truth. I'm asking big questions and having real conversations, sometimes messy and sometimes magical, with people who've lived through it, grown through it, and still don't have all the answers. If you've ever doubted yourself, betrayed your gut, or wondered if you're the only one, you're not. Let's talk about it. Welcome back to Goddess in Training. I'm Sarah, and I have to tell you, this conversation has been living in my body since the moment it ended. My guest today is Maritza Schäfer. She's the founder of Bruja School and the creator of Liberation Magic Method, a framework for real transformation that starts exactly where most self-help and spirituality stop. Raised in Chile in a family of witches and initiated into the brujeria by her grandmother, Maritza didn't learn magic as a concept. She learned it as a way of life. And she spent decades since leading global advocacy campaigns, restructuring major nonprofits, coaching executives and activists across 4 continents, living proof that spiritual power and systemic change aren't separate conversations. They're the same one. We get into all of it in this episode: why manifestation as we know it is incomplete, and what's actually missing, the difference between magical thinking and working magic, why witches have been vilified for centuries and why that's not a coincidence, the 3 axioms of liberation magic, including the one that shifted something in me, that paradox isn't just a part of life, it's life's organizing principle. And one of the most stunning personal stories I've heard on this show about a skydive, a parachute that exploded, and a grandmother who had something to say. Maritza is warm, she's sharp, she does not mince words, and she's absolutely the real thing. You can find her at brujaschool.com and on Instagram at maritza.a.schäfer. Links are in the show notes. Now, let's get into it. Hi, welcome back to Goddess in Training. I'm your host, Sarah, and today I am here with Maritza Schäfer, who is the founder of the Bruja School and the creator of Liberation Magic Method. And I am so excited for this conversation, not only because I am deep into magic manifestation. So many people use different words for what I believe to be the same thing. But we've also both spent a lot of time in the nonprofit world. And so I'm excited to dig into that a little bit and talk about the state of the world and how personal transformation can bring about change on a larger scale, because I believe that that is true. And I think that you do as well. So Maritza, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you so much for having me. It's going to be so much fun.
So you grew up in Chile and were inducted by your grandmother into the brujeria, right?
Yeah, I actually grew up in Chile in a family of witches. And so I grew up working magic and with a very natural relationship, if you will, with all things unseen and unexplained by what science knows so far. And then I moved to the US when I was 18. And that's when I realized that that wasn't very common here. And I genuinely felt like, oh my God, you poor babies, how are you doing it? That's not the response people had to me. People were like, what the heck are you talking about? And like, you're a little bit insane. Like, this is not real. We all know it. And so it was really interesting to me to live my life as a witch in the US for the last 30 plus years and encounter all different kinds of responses and reactions. Of course, it's not something that comes up necessarily super often unless you're in a particular context, but more and more over time, people around me have been like, what are you? There's something about you, right? Or like, how is it all working out this way? And I'm like, it's not me, it's magic. Happy to tell you all about it. So that's how I ended up eventually deciding to teach about it, because there's not very many places or people that are opening up this skill to the vast majority of people that might be interested in it.
I love that so much. And I use the word magic all the time. I think this world is so incredibly magical, but there's a lot of hesitation around that. And people feel more comfortable saying manifestation or, whatever other words. But for whatever reason, magic is a little uncomfortable. Why do you think that is?
Yeah, great question. Because of capitalism, misogyny, and racism. Let me explain. Manifestation, the way I've read it, like on pop culture and social media, talks about like how you can connect to your true desire and work energetically to make it so, right? And so they talk about visualization and writing things down, and every single part of it seems to have some sort of like brain explanation or neuroscientific explanation that is totally valid. And so as far as the explanation seems to pass for Western scientific standard, it's okay to say it out loud.
Hmm.
If the science is not advanced enough to explain some things, that's not my fault. So don't blame me because your science hasn't caught up. I think
Yeah.
that's one piece. I also think that manifestation, the way I understand it, is a subset of magic, because manifestation, if I understand it correctly, it's basically working on making your desire real. And
Mm.
that's a super important piece of magic. Manifestation is basically spell casting. Like you figure out what you want and then you do something to make it happen. But that's not all of the pieces of liberation magic or just working magic in general. There's energy work that has nothing to do with any sort of material outcomes, but it's about acknowledging that we are physical bodies, very real material beings, biological animals, right? But also we have a mind that is related to the brain, but it's not the same thing. And we have a lot to learn there still. And we also have an emotional life, and our hearts can be quite open or not. And we have deep joy and grief and everything in between. And there's also something else, right? That is very hard to put your finger on unless you are, I think, in a more traditional religious environment, because it's the mystery of life. It's like, how are we alive and why are we here? And most of us acknowledge that there's something animating us, right? Whether you call it spirit or life or God. But we also know that science hasn't quite caught up with that part. And so it's really difficult to talk about it or explain it or have dialogue about it, because we don't have enough of the language yet in a way that all of us understands, unless you do a deep dive in divine studies and that's your thing. It's not something that's very popularized. And it doesn't mean that it's not real. And I think that that mystery of like the life that's animating us is what you're talking about, the world being so magical, the world being so filled with wonder and things that are just awesome in the true sense of the word, right? Like they fill us with awe, is a huge part of it as well, right? Even though we don't know how to truly explain it or define it.
It's so interesting that you connect manifestation to capitalism. That's something that I haven't thought about before, but it makes so much sense that we live in this world where our worth is tied to production. And that makes sense that we're so much more comfortable being like, okay, well, if I do these things, if I have the right mindset, it's all about if I do this, this will be the outcome. And the more that I play around with manifestation, I see the deficiency in that because it doesn't work if you're attached to a specific outcome. It works when you get into flow. It's more of a knowing, and then it feels like magic when the things that you conceptualize or that you just kind of know are going to happen, they actually just happen. But for me, a vision board is not what's going to get me to the point that I want to get to. Talk more about your liberation magic method and how that does help people create the lives that they want to be living.
Yeah, great question. Sarah, I'm so appreciative to have this conversation because it's not a super popular topic, because I don't want to, like, no shade to people that, I mean, I technically do practice manifestation. Like, I think of things that I want to make happen and then I have a system and then they happen, right? And so that's not the issue. The issue is that sometimes, because folks are told manifestation practices or systems that are not full and then fail, people feel like they're doing it wrong or like it's your fault. I always use a metaphor of like, listen, if I just cross the river because I'm escaping war down south and I want to come here as a refugee, chances are that me having a mansion on my vision board is not going to work quite yet. You know what I
Right.
mean?
Right.
Because context matters. And
Mhm.
so when there's like somebody in like, in a super affluent uh context with tons of resources that's trying to teach me about how I like, visualize this into being, quite frankly, I just want to slap him and be like, Lady Noah, like you are so blind to what's actually going on here. And I think
Right.
it's a disservice to people who really are trying to feel empowered themselves, because here's the paradox, right? I genuinely believe and have experienced myself from the bottom of my heart that we can create lives beyond our wildest dreams. And that doesn't mean that there's not a whole lot of external forces conspiring against us to keep us small and oppressed and in a position where we can't make that happen, no matter how many vision boards we have. And that's not because I'm doing it wrong or because of who I am. It's because the system that we live in is designed in a particular way. And luckily, finally, most of us are realizing this ain't working, y'all. For most of us, for the people who have designed it, it's been working all along. And hence, that's a whole nother conversation for another time, right? Like that's a more political thing. So I think that ignoring the context of the person that's trying to manifest the thing is dangerous on so many levels. It makes the person feel re-victimized because they're doing it wrong, and it's just disconnected from reality. In addition to that, I think that manifestation, from what I know about some other modalities or what I've seen online or whatever, is a lot about like mindset and emotion, which I think is great. But my cosmology, if you will, my worldview is that humans have four aspects to us, right? We have a physical body, a mind, a heart, and a spirit. And in everything that we attempt, any human endeavor, there's the presence of those four. Sometimes we need way more body than mind. Sometimes we need way more spirit than heart. But not knowing about those parts of ourselves that allow us to, in a way, diagnose what's needed for any particular situation is what keeps us stuck, right?
Mm.
I would argue that in society right now, we are totally, totally overloaded on the body and mind side. Like we're obsessed about the material world and we're obsessed about the intellect and like empirical thinking, which has its place, but it's not all of it. And because we've been ignoring our hearts and our spirits, ergo the mess we're in right now. You know what I mean? And so I think that it applies at the individual level and at the macro level of society as well.
Yeah, definitely. So much of it in my own life has been an unveiling in a sense. And what I mean by that is like, I didn't have the imagination to think about myself in the place where I am right now. And it took multiple steps to open up my aperture and actually realize that where I am right now is a possibility for me. And now looking back, I realized like, oh, I had to do these things in order to, where I am right now would never have even been on my vision board. Talk a little bit more about how you encourage people or how somebody can do that step by step process to get to the place where they want to be or to just I don't live a better life because that's really all anybody wants when you're manifesting. You want things to be a little easier, a little more free. Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you so much for bringing that up because, so I grew up working magic with witches, and I don't know how to describe it because we all think we're the most normal person in the world, right? Like our reference points are all we have. So when people are like, "Oh my God, that's so interesting," and I'm like, "It could not be less interesting. It's just my life." You know what I mean?
Right.
But the reason
Right.
I bring that up is because like all of the things that I was taught and that I know that I'm like to me are like the air that I breathe and like the sky is blue sort of thing. I've understood, of course, over time that it's not very common and that people don't have access to it. And so all I did with the liberation magic method is really document and codify all of my experience and my knowledge and my skills and tools and modalities so that I can share them with others. Because I can't raise you, right? Like I was raised this way and you're
Yeah.
already a grown woman. So if I want to teach you this, I can't wait for life to go on and like organically come out in story and action. I'll just like have to give you a thing. But the reason I'm bringing that up is because in the process of documenting my knowledge and so that I could share it, I came up with this framework and method, right? Structure so that people could wrap their brains around it. And one of the things that I talk about are the skills of magic, and there's 4 pairs. We can do a deep dive if you want, but one of them is imagination, right? And so I love that you use that word because imagination is one of the core magical skills. Because if you can't dream it, it's a non-starter, right? If I go, Sarah, what do you really want? And you say, Maritza, I don't really know right now. That's the end of the conversation. Like, okay, well, so then we need to pull back and be like, okay, well, how are you feeling right now? Maybe we'll discover that like you're hungry and maybe you want a ham sandwich and maybe you want a gourmet meal, right? And like we're only gonna discover that through a certain process of self-awareness and understanding aspects of yourself and your needs and all of that, and being able to dream up what would be amazing, or at least less crappy than right now. So I think that this imagination piece is super, super important. And when I work with people, I always tell them that when we do spellcasting is just a practice, a methodology for manifestation, if you will. It's for making, a desire become real. And so I always tell my students, we're not casting for impossible, we're casting for improbable. Because if you right now believe that your desire is impossible, it is. It's a
Mm.
non-starter. It is. But if
Mm.
you believe your desire is improbable, we can work with that. And then what happens is that you do the work, the improbable becomes real, and then the impossible becomes improbable. And that's how you're scaffolding your desire, like in the example that you shared, that's so beautiful. I mean, I don't know much about your life, but I can imagine a trajectory where like, wow, where I am today, I couldn't have even imagined before. And I'm pretty sure that it wasn't like overnight and you magically, like they say in quotes, magically, like it's not a thing, right? Ended up there, although you did magically end up there because all of the necessary steps required to get you where you are, you actually took.
Mhm.
So
Mhm.
one pet peeve of mine is that people say like magic, like it's not a thing, like it's not real, or like magical thinking. And I'm like, you know what? Magical thinking is BS. Like if you think about something and hope it happens, nothing's going to happen. But if you work magic, which is a craft of
Mhm.
transforming reality, of course it's going to happen because the work works. It's like if you go to the gym enough, you're going to get stronger, even if you don't want to, because that's the outcome of doing that work. You know what I mean?
Exactly. So when you're talking about spell casting and doing magic, what does that actually look like, and how much of that is intention setting?
A lot, in the sense that if you don't have the intention, it's a non-starter because like what are we doing? It's like getting in the car and not knowing where you're going. I'm like, well, I mean, I can drive around, but I'm not gonna get anywhere because I don't have a destination, right? And so spell casting is one piece, one aspect of the liberation magic method. And what I mean by that is that I basically teach people the entire magical framework of the brujeria tradition that I grew up with, which talks about, again, aspects of ourselves, levels of consciousness, different divination tools, different axioms of magic, ways of being and knowing that we just know to be true. And in that context, then you get a whole toolkit and a whole set of practices that allow you to do so many things, amongst them spellcasting. I don't know how to explain it to you without like doing a deep dive into the whole methodology because I don't want to necessarily like lecture you on that right now, but I hope that paints a picture of the process.
Yeah, definitely. So curious about growing up in Chile and in the brujeria and it being so women centered and about your family and your mother and your grandmother. What does that kind of childhood and upbringing look like? And how would you contrast it to the world that we're living in, which is, I would argue, you know, we are casting away Mother Earth. We are not honoring women. We're not honoring the womb. We're not honoring um, the life givers in this way. So how did you grow up that was different, and how is your world vision different because of that?
Yeah, great question. I mean, look, in terms of like the honoring the earth, how well is that working out for us?
Right.
You know what I mean? Like it's so obvious when you look at the entire state of the world that it's not going so well. It's not working out for the vast majority of humans on Earth. And that it doesn't seem to be a coincidence that the fact that we're abusing and exploiting the Earth connects with the fact that a few folks are abusing and exploiting all the rest of us. To me, it's like crazy that we're still somewhat in denial about that. I think that for me, growing up with magic, what was super special about it is that it was a given that there are some unseen forces and that not everything that is real can be explained. And that alone gives me such a different perspective. So let's use an example. Before we discovered antibiotics, okay, we were dying of like a freaking cavity in our mouth, right? In a tooth, because like we didn't have a way to interact it. And then somebody figured it out, and there's a really beautiful explanation. How did they figure it out? Kind of like accidentally. And the fact that, let me put it this way, antibiotics work whether we understand the mechanism of them working or not. We ended up with that compound in our system, even though we didn't know it was going to do the antibioticing, it would have done that. Do you know what I mean? And that's like the metaphor that I use for our spiritual lives. Like our spirit and unseen forces of nature are real, whether or not we can explain them intellectually. Right. And so waiting for the intellectual explanation to take advantage of that seems to me like a waste of time. Like
Mm.
it's not my fault that we're not advanced enough to be able to articulate it in a way that makes us happy in the head, when in practice, I try it and it works. And sometimes I can tell you why, and many times I can't tell you why. But if it works, it works. So why not use it? You know what I mean? So I think that that's definitely given me a very unique perspective, in that I'm open minded and willing to try things, even if I don't have like every single detail. When, if you think about it, is quite a powerful tool to go through life with, because life is so uncertain. And especially these days, just like in plain French, it's such a shit show out there that
Yeah.
if we wait to understand everything, to have a guarantee that it's going to be okay, to fully understand what's going on before we take action, we would die sitting on our couch doing nothing. And so having this familiarity, if you will, with the unknown, I feel that is such a gift, and I'm so grateful for it. It's such an advantage in a way.
Yeah, the way that I approach it is, I think, with some humility and humor too, that like I see more magic happen when I'm just kind of approaching the world in a why not kind of way. Like, I don't know, maybe if I cast this spell, it will give me the result that I want. Maybe not. And when I go into things in that way, it's light and it's airy. And we get so, like you said, so caught up in our heads and our logical brains that keeps us from the magic and the beauty all around us. I'm curious to hear you talk more about paradox, because I feel more and more that the world that we're living in right now, right, is, like you said, a total shit show. But on the other side of it, it's awakening so many people to our power and our magic. Talk a little bit about what you're seeing.
Yeah. Super great that you would ask me about paradox because there's three axioms of magic, right, that I work with and I teach my students. And one of them is that paradox is life's organizing principle.
Mm.
Okay. So it's not just that paradox is a part of life, but it's actually the foundation of all of it. And I think that because that's something that we forgot or that we became in denial about or that we buried because it worked to the advantage of some, that most of us didn't remember that, we don't think about it as often. But I genuinely believe that that's the case. It's very rare where you find a situation in reality, in nature, in human life, where it's either this or that, and it's all very clear. It's usually messier than that. And again, the quicker you relax into that idea, the better. I have been very compelled to work on social justice issues my entire life, partly because I'm just wired this way, partly because I grew up in Chile in a dictatorship and that was kind of motivating. But then I think, yeah, and so did other 20 million people, and they're doing all kinds of work that have nothing to do with this. So I don't know why this is, but it's part of my calling. And so I worked in the nonprofit sector for a couple of decades, running social justice campaigns. And my best friend is a social worker. And I was always telling her, we don't have time to change people one by one. Like the level of mess is too wide. Like this needs to be mass transformation. And she'd be like, uh-huh, because she knows that mass transformation is not available without individual transformation.
Mm.
And individual transformation does not happen in isolation. We need community. And hopefully, from there, we also have an impact on what's happening in society at large, right? And so it's a very symbiotic relationship between, I mean, the whole, that's now a cliche, but Gandhi's quote about being the change you want to see has become the cliche it is because it's so deeply wise. Like it's not going to happen any other way. And so over time, while I still do a lot of social change work and even straight up political work, have also realized that me teaching spiritual tools and helping people work with their own magic is an absolutely key piece of the puzzle because the systems of oppression work best when we are disconnected from ourselves, when we're disconnected from each other, and when we don't know how to tap into our own power. And I think that this is why witches have been vilified and demonized for as long as they have, because imagine if women and just people in general knew their value, knew how to tap into it, knew how to leverage their power, were absolutely unwilling to take crap and like deal with like low vibe energy in their lives, the entire neoliberal capitalistic system would collapse, right? And so I think it's not a coincidence. And when people are like, well, like, are witches scary? Witches are terrifying because they actually have the power to dismantle the system. If you're a good person and you are for human rights and you love the earth and you want to be healthy in community, chances are you have a little bit of witch in you. And if those things don't attract you, then yes, you should be scared of witches because we're coming for you. Like, we're not going to put up with this. You know what I mean?
Yeah, yeah. And I have been through a similar kind of evolution where being young and thinking about social change and wanting to be on the forefront of that and working in the nonprofit sector. And then as I got older and saw the inside of these systems more closely, I became very disenchanted with what the possibility actually is for large systemic change in the way that I thought was possible when I was younger. And that evolution of kind of me understanding how hard it is because those powers are integrated into every single system, not just the ones that are the suspects that we think of. Like the nonprofit world is full of institutions and systems that are not there for actual real social change in the way that you and I are talking about human rights and equality. And it was really, really hard for me to see that and digest it.
Mm.
And I'm so grateful that at the same time as that was being revealed to me, I was also on this path of personal transformation because, like you said, that is where not only where we have the most control, really, we can only control ourselves. We only really have power to change ourselves, but where I just have so much more hope and it feels more transformative. It feels more powerful to be working on the individual level rather than this systemic level. Are you shifting more to the individual transformation and are you feeling disenchanted a little bit with the nonprofit kind of like large social change? Or are you still hopeful that we can make these changes at this large level?
I mean, definitely, I think like both are necessary. It's really funny because for a long time, my background is in communications. So I was doing communications for a bunch of progressive nonprofits. I ran all kinds of campaigns. And the last job I had was actually running campaigns. I was leading the oceans campaign for Greenpeace International. And I decided that like I didn't want to work for the nonprofit sector anymore. And I started my own consulting company. And what I do is organizational development, right? Which basically means when people need to work together and they're not able to do what they want to be doing, I help them do that. So it's a lot of training and facilitation and coaching and helping transform an organizational culture and strategy and the structures to be able to fulfill the strategy and all that. But I ended up doing that from communications because when I was trying to do my communications work, I ended up, in quotes, accidentally restructuring 3 organizations because I couldn't do my job because we weren't set up to do it. And why
Mhm.
is that? Because humans, right? And so what happened was that at the individual level, people were like, oh, the CEO is, I don't know, racist. And the CEO is like, our staff is so whiny. And I mean, I'm totally caricaturizing. Nobody talks like that, just for the record. But, like all these conflicts. And I'm like, well, let's work on that, right? And so what happens is that when you help a group of people align behind their purpose and what they have in common in a really practical way, and then give them the tools to connect with each other and communicate and be effective and manage their projects and all the things, then it's like not rocket science. Most of us, in the same way that most of us are not brought up with magic and spiritual tools, most of us are also not brought up with a lot of emotional tools or even management tools. Like the way people ascend in most institutions is like, you're doing a great job. Great. Now you're going to be in charge of people that do that job. Well, the fact that I know how to do that job doesn't mean that I know how to deal with people, right? And so I see more and more the connection. And it's so interesting, Sarah, because I have two sides of my business. I have the consulting side and the spiritual tool side. And all advisors have always been like, Maritza, if you picked one, you could like grow so much faster and make more money and have more impact. And I'm like, yeah, but I would feel so incomplete, you know? Because I really believe that I mean, I don't know that the nonprofit institution itself is going to have much of an impact, but I believe that the people that work there are committed to their missions and I want to help them. And the fact that people don't have spiritual lives or that their spiritual lives are not truly fulfilling to them or that they don't know how to access their own power and really feel grounded and connected to, again, themselves, spirit, nature, their community. I'm like, if I can help you with that, how could I not? And so I'm doing both at the moment and we'll see how long this is sustainable for because
Yeah.
life changes and we'll see what happens. But particularly in 2026, I've been spending more and more time on Bruja school
Uh-huh.
because of a lot of circumstantial reasons. It seems like that's where I'm most needed at the moment.
I would love to live in a world where we do integrate those two things more. And I've been on the fundraising side of nonprofits, and I really, really wish that funders understood the impact of the kind of work that you're talking about growing people in their jobs and fostering these emotional skills because I've seen that too, that organizations and mission and impact expands when individuals are learning those kinds of skills. And so anyway, that's my public service announcement for any possible funders who are listening right now that, there's no direct capitalistic mindset of like if I give this money, I'm going to have this kind of outcome. People aren't going to give money to people like you who are growing these kinds of skills and organizations. But if they did, there would be a huge, huge impact.
No, totally. Again, but that goes back to my point that it's like because we're super disconnected about the nature of reality. And what I mean by that is how things actually work. If I'm a funder, I actually have a lot of my clients have been foundations, and because I work with nonprofits, I'm quite well versed in the philanthropic sector. And what happens is that when your philanthropy needs to have a measurable outcome, again, it's not my fault that we don't have really refined tools to measure emotional and spiritual outcomes yet. I mean, we can get pictures, right? There's like all kinds of methodologies. There's like qualitative data, we can use surveys, we can use interviews, we can have narratives that show us that these things are usually helpful. But I think that so many people just, again, the fear of uncertainty, like, I want to know that if I give you $1 million, it's going to have an impact. And how do I measure that impact? And I'm like, wow, what a lack of, again, imagination and faith that like
Mhm.
if you try, I mean, there's like a whole area of like, trust-based philanthropy that's exactly about this. It's like people in the trenches know better. Just give the freaking money back, because let's face it, if you're in a position to be in philanthropy, that money wasn't yours to begin with. No
Yeah.
kind of hoarding comes without oppression and exploitation.
Mhm. It's true.
The whole billionaires are absolutely a policy failure. So I agree. I mean, I think, and I think that part of the problem too is that this time in humanity's history is so messy because, if I'm talking to a funder, it's like, well, I don't want to use my money to basically like raise staff at this NGO. Like, why don't they have emotional tools? Like, shouldn't they come to work like fully competent grown-ups? And I'm like, of course they quote should. But point to me a competent grown-up out there. Like, we're all struggling. You know what I mean? Not one of us has it figured out and it's perfect. So yeah, maybe we need to spend some time at our work lives working on these kinds of things because we're there for the majority of our waking hours. Where else are we going to do it? So I agree.
Well,
And I do think that that kind of thinking is becoming more and more mainstream because we're realizing that we're out of options. It's like everything is crumbling and everything that we thought was working is not. So we just got to continue to experiment, right?
mhm. And we don't have these skills as adults because if you look at at least the school systems here in the United States, I don't know what kind of education you had, but these skills are not fostered in our public school systems in any way, shape, or form. It's all about, again, going back to production, and your worth is tied to what kinds of grades you get on standardized testing. And it's all just completely backwards.
Totally. 100% agree. And I think that it's so awesome that this is becoming more and more obvious and more mainstream, right? Like the conversation that you and I are having right now was unthinkable to be accessible to the general public 20 years ago, definitely 30. You know what I mean? Like it was not going to happen. And today it's been had enough that here we are having it yet again. And anybody in the world that wants to access it can. I mean, I think that that's the kind of thing that also gives me a lot of hope. It's like the gig is up. We all know that this is just completely unsustainable. Everywhere we look, there's more and more evidence of that. And I'm optimistic. The problem, of course, is the transition into something better is painful and difficult, and it has a super high cost for those of us living through it, some of us more than others. But I really hope we get there. I think we do. I
I
think
am
life
also
wants to live. You know what I mean? Like humans will find a way.
I am also hopeful. And I think that the more that women understand their power and claim their power and utilize their power, that's what's going to get us over this very painful hump. I am so curious tell me about some of the most magical moments that have happened in your life.
My God, what a great question. I'm so unprepared for that.
I'm sure you have a lot.
There's so many. I do actually. I think one of the most magical moments, well, this is so funny. When I was younger, I was a skydiver. Um, I remember I went on a skydive after my grandma had passed away several years later. I went on a skydive on her birthday, and she came with me on the jump. It was the most surreal experience. It's very hard to describe, but like I came out of the plane and she was there, and I was in free fall for maybe, I don't know, 30, 45 seconds, and we had a whole conversation, and it was incredibly vivid and real. And the moment I go to pull the parachute, I felt like there was something little inside of me that was like, there's no way that just happened. Like that was just like me. You know what I mean? There was like a moment of like disbelief. Sarah, I go to pull the parachute and it literally explodes. It just like it ripped in a million pieces. And then it's not a big deal when you skydive, like you have sooner or later, you're going to fly your reserve parachute. It's like getting a flat tire. And so then I cut away the main parachute and I pull the reserve and I'm flying it. And I'm like, and by then I'm in tears because the way I experienced that was that my grandmother needed to give me a physical sign that our meeting had been true. And because she knew that I was kind of like, I don't know, then this happened. Like now I'm thinking about it. I'm going to find the journal of when like I wrote down about that experience, because it was like a really profound. When you hear the story, it sounds kind of dumb and like not a big deal, but my experience of it was her spirit is alive and well somewhere and is totally able to be in contact with me. And that happened. And if you're being all skeptical on me, I'm going to break your toy to get your attention. And that's exactly how I experienced it. And it was like so, so beautiful. And I talk about
Wow.
it to this day. And I told my friends at the drop zone what had happened and the whole story. And I was lucky enough that they were like, yeah, like, no, they got it. Like they believed it and they got it. And I felt totally held and supported. It was kind of beautiful.
Wow. Oh my gosh. What an amazing story. And I can feel it. I had a feeling that it was going to be something connected to your grandmother, too, that you spoke about. But something that I've been thinking a lot about recently is tied to this story that you just told. I feel like I am divinely protected. I also know
Hmm.
that, like in your parachute story, that you have to have the backup parachute, even though you're divinely protected. How do you
Correct.
describe that connection, that like have that both things being true at the same time? That we have to take the steps to protect ourselves, but at the same time, I have this knowing that everything's going to be okay.
Totally. I mean, again, paradox is life's organizing principle. So to me, like, of course, it's how you're describing, like, that's just part of life. B, have you heard this saying about pray for potatoes and God gives you a shovel? Which basically is like, yes, I feel, I mean, like, look, this is a bottom line. We're all gonna die, right? We know that. Like, this is not me being weird. It's like, it's just a fact. Like, we're all gonna die. So at the end of the day, there's like no getting out of your life. You know what I mean? So whatever happens between now and then is kind of irrelevant when you look at it from the perspective of how finite and insignificant our lives are. And what happens between now and then is all we have. So every moment is absolutely precious and important. And I want to be engaged in my life so that, like you said, I have a better life, whatever that means for me, like feeling a little bit freer, feeling a little bit more connected, feeling a little bit more relaxed. And I think that for those of us who choose to be consciously with the intention of walking a spiritual path, that means that there's something else at work that I'm not sure exactly what it is, but I know that is in, you know, my reality and I'm in relationship with it in one way or another. Life kind of sucks a lot of the time. And there's going to be grief and there's going to be death and there's going to be illness and there's going to be fascists and there's going to be all of the freaking things and there's going to be the tech billionaires and there's going to be, right? And what am I going to, how, not even what am I going to do with that, but how am I going to be through that is the
Right.
ultimate spiritual question, I think. And so, like, of course, I'm going to try to protect myself. every morning energetically, I do that at an energetic level. And also I lock my car when I park it downtown. You know what I mean? Like all of the normal things. It knowing that we walk in divine protection doesn't mean that we're stupid.
Right.
That's how
Right.
I would answer that. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? And that's back to the manifestation thing of like, we can't change reality if we don't face it. So I can be obsessing about my freaking mansion in my vision board until I'm blue in the face. But if I'm not also acknowledging the reality of the context that I'm living in, it's going to be really hard and it's probably not going to work. So both are true. And so that's such an important lesson that I share with the folks that come to me for support in this way. Cause it's like, I know we all want life to be clean and simple and very neatly packaged so we can exhale a sigh of relief, and that's not going to happen in this incarnation. What are we going to do about that next? Right. So,
Yeah, a lot of my listeners are women in midlife, and I am as well. And one of the things that I'm most grateful for in being in this era, this point in my life, is I think that I have a better understanding of what you just said, understanding the true reality of life, that it's impossible to completely turn away from and not have the fascists and the harm and the horrible things that we experience. And another podcast guest said something to me that really stuck, that it's about having reverence for all of the things, because we're in this human experience, and that to say, well, we should try to completely eliminate some aspect of it from our lives isn't the point. I think the point is to experience everything. How are you feeling in midlife? And are you feeling different than you did when you were in your 20s? And are you at a point where you're feeling, like me personally, like I feel excited and more alive than I've ever felt before?
oh, that's wonderful. Yeah, I remember when I was younger, all my other friends were like, you just wait, you're going to get to a point and you're just not going to give a fuck. And I'm like, I can't imagine not giving less fucks that I already do. Because, like, again, and I think that's because I grew up in a particular way. I'm like, I've always felt quite free in many ways. But it's true because like we just have more experience with being in relationship with ourselves, is if nothing else, like we know our own selves better, right? And I think that makes life so much easier. So like the sooner you start your conscious relationship with your own self, the freer you're going to feel throughout your life. I think that back to your point of like, taking the bad with the good and that we can like fix everything. It's not just that it's not necessarily a good idea. It's just like not possible, right? Like the nature of reality, again, second axiom of liberation magic, everything is born, grows, dies, and is reborn, right? People, galaxies, corporations, relationships. And some parts are maybe not as pleasant, right? Like the decay part, like when an animal dies and it's, you drive past some roadkill, that is not a pretty sight. And it's as real as the birth and the growth. We don't get to choose. Like, let's come out of denial. And again, back to the systemic connection, economic growth. And I'm like, oh my God, we can't have infinite economic growth on Earth. Like, that's how I'm like, not, I don't. Anyway, so the quicker we accept life and reality as she really is, instead of how we would want her to be, the quicker we're going to stop trashing ourselves and the planet, because I think that's the outcome of being in denial at the macro level. And at the personal level, when you're not willing to be present with yourself and have this kind of, self-awareness and reflection, then it also has negative outcomes that express themselves in all kinds of ways, like bad habits, addictions, broken relationships, mental health issues. It's, not that those things wouldn't happen, but we're way better prepared to handle them when we're present to our
Yeah.
own experience.
Exactly. Maritza, I have loved this conversation so much. I have so many more questions. I think that I would love to have some follow up conversation with you at some point. But what's coming up for you that you're excited about?
Right now, I'm working really hard on inviting as many people as possible to join Liberation Magic. I've historically kind of like been hesitant about like, well, do I really need the CEO of this think tank that I'm restructuring to see me on Instagram reading the tarot cards? And I don't really give a shit anymore because I read the tarot cards, I can do such a great job restructuring your think tank. And if you don't see that, that's again not my problem that you're not able to fully grasp that yet. And maybe it's a function of age, like you were saying. I'm becoming more and more comfortable owning like the full spectrum of all of my bits and pieces. And so I'm doing a lot more things like this, having conversations with people, reaching out and letting folks know that if you're interested in a spiritual life that's truly yours and that feels like liberation rather than a chore, there's absolutely a way to do it. And it's actually not even that hard. It does take work, but it's the best work you'll ever do.
I love that so much. And yeah, like it's a different concept of work in my own experience. Like it's not work in the sense of the systems that we've been living under, but the work that I've done that sounds like really similar to what you're teaching doesn't feel like work because it just has that positive
I
feedback
know.
loop all the time. Opens you up to see the amazing things that are around us every single day.
Totally. Absolutely. Yeah. No, I think the more and more people that want to grow personally and develop spiritually and are open to exploring themselves in this way, the quicker we're going to get to a better place as a society at large. Yeah.
Definitely. Maritza, thank you so much.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. It's been so fun to have this conversation. I super appreciate it.
Thank you for tuning in to Goddess in Training. I hope something in this episode stirred your knowing or softened your heart. If it spoke to you, share it with someone who needs it, or leave a review or comment to help others find us. If you're watching on YouTube, please like this video and subscribe to the channel. If you want to hear more conversations like this, please consider supporting Goddess in Training on Patreon. For more tools and offerings to deepen your intuition practice, visit goddessintraining.online. You can also join the Scroll of Sashat on Substack for twice-weekly stories of how I followed my intuition. The music for Goddess in Training is Madre Ayahuasca by Arkawa, and you can find more of his music in the link to his website in the show notes. Remember, your intuition is not a mystery, it's a memory. Keep listening.
Resplandor del fuego, estrellita, tabaco santo, fuerza de rape, soplo de luz, soplo encantado, viajecito bendito.